My guest is fellow YouTuber Dooovid. Dooovid and I often discuss American Jewish issues, Israel issues. Dooovid, how are you?
Yeah, excellent. Thank God. Sukkah holiday, Chag Sameach, blessings to everybody. Enjoy their Sukkah. Last Thursday, it was Yom Kippur. Hopefully, people had a meaningful fast and meditation and introspection. And hopefully, God is going to bless the world with positive things.
Amen. And of course, coming up is Simchas Torah, which is the end and beginning of the annual reading of the Torah. And it usually always is accompanied by rejoicing and dancing with the Torah. You go outside the synagogue onto the street in the case of my synagogue. And, it's a great day. I know a friend of mine grew up in Mexico, and he said that they would do Simchat Torah with a lot of armed guards around because they were nervous. But either way, it is a very public thing, and it is we believe the Torah was divine, at least divinely inspired, if not given by God, and thus it is the Holy Writ. Everything is in it, like I was telling E. Michael Jones earlier. Everything is in it, according to the Talmudic rabbis. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, or at least specifically the first five books of Moses. From
Right.
a Judeo perspective, that we're I don't call us. You could look at us as like followers of Moses. I mean, really, we're the followers of Hashem. But the law, the scripture, and any level of prophecy, Moses is given precedence. The ritual, and any time anything goes to synagogue, the most holy moments are always opening up the ark, and in our ark is exclusively the books of Moses. So it might be nicely dressed, but it's not gold and anything fancy. The only thing that's in our ark is Moses.
That's right. We revere the five. Well, I mean, the breakdown of the books of the Torah and the entire Tanakh, we should credit the early Catholic Church for that. They're the ones who codified it, broke it down into parshas, broke it down into sentences, and that was pretty much adopted by the rabbis. As I mentioned, I had on E. Michael Jones, The Jewish Revolutionary Spirit, where he's come out with a few new chapters and he's reissued the book. And he makes the traditional Christian position that the Talmud is is like a reinvention of Judaism, which is newer than Christianity because of the codification of the Talmud. And he talks about the fact that we can't fulfill the covenant because we no longer have a temple, and we no longer have the ritual sacrifice, and all of the things that go along with that, things that are codified in the Torah. And I kind of countered that, and I know we talked about this with things that I've been reading from Abraham Joshua Heschel, who talks about Judaism as having basically three elements. The first is belief in God and the creator of the universe and the giver of the law, and that's eternal. The second is belief in the Torah itself, that this is revealed wisdom, that's revealed law from the divine, and that it's how we order our lives, how we order the universe, how we order nation states, our relationships, allowed and forbidden. It is everything in it. And then the third thing was the temple. And the temple is third on the list because the temple was built after Moses, who was at Sinai at the holiest moment in history, receiving the Torah, while the children of Israel were below worshiping the golden calf, which was the lowest point and which was sin. And so he realized that they needed to come up with a place that could represent God, a physical place, because man was not yet at the point where we could spiritually understand a transcendent God that's everything, that's everywhere and nowhere, that's everything. And so he created a place, the tabernacle, and he created ritual around that. But that's not the centerpiece. That's not critical to the function of the covenant. It is there just for the purpose of knowing God. That's the whole point of it. And you know, we talked about a movement in the state of Israel to rebuild the temple, and my position on that is very cautious. I pray that it happens, but I'm not sure we're ready spiritually for that. And I think that it's a process that ought to involve a lot of deliberations jointly frankly, from Jews and Muslims, who ought to form some sort of a council where you have religious experts on both sides, maybe even some secular experts, who figure that out, and that process may take 100 years. What say you, Dooovid?
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of research on philosophy and theology and dualism and monism, and I'm careful to say all the prayers. I was in yeshiva a long time and lived in ultra Orthodox culture. I prayed with Minyan 3 times a day for well over 10 years, and you're really the centerpiece of the prayer service is the animal sacrifices, even though we just say the words, but the Musaf, anytime we read the Torah, and then we have the Musaf section, and the Musaf section is basically a reading of the animal sacrifices, or not just animal sacrifices. Animal sacrifices would have been the minimum, because most of them were like bread and grain, and the Musaf prayer is the center inserted part for the holidays is the sacrifices that would have been brought. And like Spinoza, who was you'll call like a monist, a pantheist that didn't accept classical dualism in the basic theology of Yom Kippur, that usually the sages laid out that if a person sins, some sins are small enough that if you make amends, we feel bad about it, we go to sleep that night, say I'm not going to do it again, and made amends immediately. It's like it didn't happen. Other sins leave some sort of imprint that can't disappear until Yom Kippur, that a person like, repent, I'm sorry I did, I'm not going to do it again. But the sin is weighing there, like, will we be punished? How big of a blemish is it going to leave till Yom Kippur? And certain sins, even Yom Kippur can't forgive for, and only death and I guess the decay of the flesh will be the atonement. And then God forbid, there's other sins that even death can't atone for, and there could be punishment after death in order to atone for the sins. And the animal sacrifice in the theology plays an integral part. And really, you need a dualistic theology, that there's some sort of separate spiritual realm from the physical realm that keeps track of all of these deeds. Like the storehouse of all our good deeds and bad deeds is not something of a material phenomenon, and certain rituals that could have an effect, like there's a perfect God who has a perfect accounting of all the good and bad we did, but there's certain things that we could do that could counter it, and the action in the material world counters it, so to say, in the spiritual world. And one of those things clearly is animal sacrifices. And if you're straightforward arguing with a Christian, you say like, no, I'm sorry that believing in Jesus will not be an atonement for your sin. The only way to have atonement for the sin is to have a sacrifice offered in the temple. And if we're Jews right now and we want the temple to be rebuilt as possibly a mitzvah, but also just I want atonement for my sins. And the scripture lays out that it's just prescribed that the only way to get atonement is to have the animal sacrifice, and our God designed it that way. It's factually, that's what our books say. Moses clearly writes it out that God designed the system, that animal sacrifices have some sort of dualistic spiritual effect. And one of those things is atonement for sin. And that's like the logical believing Christian, that really the biggest logical proof to Christianity is the Jewish people, and our insistency on keeping the Mosaic law, and then God forbid from the Christian perspective, the suffering of the Jewish people, which might also be a logical proof that Christians would believe. But I mean, as a reformer, you just say like I said, like someone part Cherokee or saying like you don't really believe that your ancestral rituals are true, just whatever evolution, archaeology, anthropology, this is what our ancestors did with the best of their knowledge, superstition, because they didn't understand science. And that's a Reformed Jewish approach that our ancestors did our best with what they knew, and they didn't know anything about science or spirituality or medicine. And so they just thought that there's this spiritual realm that recorded good and bad deeds, and bad things happened to us because we didn't obey the law good enough. And this magic type stuff, like sacrificing animals, somehow would have had an effect to magically make our bad deeds go away. And they said, like, I'm a follower of Moses, and Moses says that's just the way it works. And even though we can't understand how it works, that's why I've been studying these dualistic theologies. Like, no, there's a spiritual realm, and like the butterfly effect in the material realm, there's some sort of butterfly effect between the rituals that we do in the material realm that affects the spiritual realm, and that includes these animal sacrifices. And it's tough to know. We've talked about this in the past. Maimonides, Nachmanides. Is it dispensational? Is it that the prayer took the place and has the same effect as the animal sacrifices did in the previous ages, which is similar to the Christian thing, like belief in Jesus? Or is it like Nachmanides, the Ramban, who says reality is everything that we do as Jews today is really just a reminder to us that we should try to rebuild our temple and go back to our ancestral way of life, because God forbid we will have no atonement for our sins unless in our lifetime, unless the temple is rebuilt and we're able to bring these sacrifices that according to the prophets will somehow grant us atonement for our mistakes.
Dooovid, I mean, I don't in any way pretend to be an expert on the topic, nor am I a rabbi, obviously. So I'm going with whatever little knowledge that I've gained over the years. But I do hope that we rebuild the temple at the right time. And when we've reached that level of spirituality, I pray for that. However, it's my understanding that Judaism says, I mean, and going back to Sinai,
because you believe the prophecies are true and our ancestral traditions are factually true. It's not like we were superstitious and didn't know any better and didn't understand science.
I believe every word of it. But the point I'm making is that it did not mean that it was exclusively through temple sacrifice of animals that you obtained atonement. That there were many ways to obtain atonement, and these were practiced before the temple and during the period between the first and second temple, and ever since. And that I could be way off base on this, but
the scripture clearly says that when you do certain sins, you have to bring an atonement offering, and the atonement isn't complete until the offering is brought.
I'm not sure it's exclusive. I'm also not sure that there were other means of gaining atonement. But what was I going to say? You kind of interrupted my thinking. Anyway, the idea is that that there is a certain aspect to the ritual of kosher slaughter of animals that goes to this. There's an element of that involves the sacrifice, that there were sacrifices of animals conducted and not at the temple always, including in the time of the judges and kings. And that the Talmud clearly lays out a means by which we can continue to gain atonement in anticipation of the temple. And that means is very clearly delineated during the Yom Kippur service. So anyway, but again, I'm not claiming to be an absolute expert on the topic. What else is going on, Dooovid?
Yeah, there's a lot going on, especially with the border crisis and the funding, and I guess Israel's being brought into the main news with the Iron Dome funding. We talked about when Bennett came and he largely secured the support of the Biden administration to you give an extra $1 billion
Yeah.
which I guess is a straight out extra $1 billion added to the regular military aid to Israel in order to replenish the Iron Dome.
Sure.
And they were going to stick that in the, Biden, I don't know if it's still called the infrastructure package. And then, because the votes are so narrow that the squad or just a handful of Congress people were able to threaten to vote against it if they included the funding of the Iron Dome replenishment in it, that they've dropped it from the infrastructure bill, that they've already reintroduced legislation to as a standalone bill to replenish the aid to Israel. And then, God forbid what's happening on the border. And I thought maybe it might be a worthwhile exercise to look at the ethics and morals of what's happening with Haiti and say, and in comparison with with Israel, obviously the different situations, but let's say there's about over 10 million people in Haiti, and let's say it's a failed government and possibly global warming or weather events, that they're going to need to evacuate millions of people from Haiti, and they really have no future in Haiti and need to go someplace. And let's say that, of the Haitians, 20, 30, 50% of them want to come to America. So you got 5 million people that want to come, millions of people that want to come to America. And let's say they're legitimately, if you want to call them refugees, and we send them back to Africa or something, or to Mexico, but Haiti's pretty close to America. And if you're looking at it, it's probably not stable long-term, just because the government has failed, and the constant earthquakes and hurricanes, that it makes sense that there's tens of thousands of Haitians trying to come to America, and they might, might really be millions. That instead of if it's that bad, there. And then I listened to the video. Andy Levin was part of it, but the Congressional Black Caucus, and saying like it reminded him of slave days with people, horses chasing down blacks and saying you got to go back. You can't come through the border. You're not welcome here. And it's a question I could see. Okay, certainly if you're black, maybe anybody to say, okay, no, we have to absorb these millions of Haitians. It's not safe in Haiti for them anymore, and we have to absorb them, even if it's millions of them.
Well, first of all, Dooovid, most of the Haitians coming in are not in Haiti. They had already been received. They'd already gotten asylum, primarily in Brazil and Chile, 10 years ago. Now they're coming in, so they've already got asylum. Now, I mean, I see this.
Well, you can't see that really there's hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of Haitians
much of the world would like to come
that need to be evacuated, and probably have no place better to come than America.
Your theories about global warming are very speculative and questionable, but I would simply suggest that none of this would be happening if Trump was allowed to serve his second term. That the wall would have been finished. It was almost finished anyways. And that the embassies in Mexico and in Guatemala and Honduras, which were brought about through a special agreement between the US and those countries, would have continued to process legitimate refugee claims. And they were shut down by Biden the first day in office. And the wall literally is being apparently taken down and turned into scrap metal. So you have a humanitarian crisis because hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of people are saying, oh, okay, open borders. They've erased the border, so people are swarming in. That combined with the Afghanistan catastrophe, combined with inflation, now people are noticing that that products are losing quantity while prices are going up, combined with the implementation of critical theory in schools. These things all add up to a complete failure of this administration. But as far as the actual facts on the ground, if global warming theoretically is such a problem that it's going to create worldwide starvation, and I'm not saying it is, I don't believe it is, but that's for scientists to decide. Why would the United States be any different than Haiti? I mean, Why are we going to sustain the entire world's population? I mean, global warming doesn't have borders, assuming it's true.
Well, I mean, I think the logic's pretty simple. Haiti is an island. It's prone to more earthquakes and hurricanes, and it's probably, being an island, more difficult to have a stable food supply and power outages and various things. And if there's more than 10 million people on the island of Haiti, and they have to start evacuating people in the millions, I would assume that
Those are very
probably the
theoretical.
United States would be the place where the majority of them would want to come.
Yeah,
And you could
of course, the
take, you're
majority
saying,
of
well,
people
you're not
all over the
welcome
world
here.
would wanna come.
We'll build a wall like Israel,
No,
like
it's
probably
not-
like Trump wanted, say, you're not welcome here. If you
No.
come here, we're gonna have you returned. And if you insist on trying to break through the wall, we're gonna shoot you on the spot.
It's
God
not,
for-
it's
God
not just
forbid.
Haiti, it's if people from most countries in the world would like to come here. I mean, I think that if you gave, like, for example, I don't know, Yemen, or we could name just about any nation, said, look, we're opening the border, you can all come here. We'll send planes for you. They probably would evacuate the whole country. Everybody wants to come here because we are a successful nation. We can
Yeah, but
help
saying Haiti
these
is the
countries.
most logical. I'm saying like
Yeah,
Yemen,
but we could help
Afghanistan,
Haiti.
Africa. There's 10 million people in Haiti. They're probably in relatively pretty bad shape. And the
I heard about
likelihood that they're going to be able to restructure some sort of stable government might be pretty low. And I don't know, I mean, Haiti's probably close to Mexico or South America. But yeah, I mean, presumably
Well, look,
because
I mean,
America is
Dooovid,
more
I think we
prosperous, they're
could've-
going to want to come here. And you just say, no, we don't want you here. You're
That's
not
right, I
welcome.
am saying
And if
that.
you insist on coming here, we will shoot you. God
That's
forbid.
right. That's right. Look, I think that Haiti, unfortunately, we could do a lot of things to help Haiti where it is. Unfortunately, you had this very corrupt Clinton Foundation. I'm not going to get into that because I'll probably get torn down on YouTube. But they didn't do diddly squat while they raised who knows how many billions of dollars.
I mean, accepting the basic migration premise that there's over 10 million people there and there's nothing good there waiting for them. And they're probably going to have to evacuate
Well, we
millions
could
of
do
people from
things
the
for
island.
them in
And where are these
Haiti,
millions of people
is
that
my
need to be
point, Dooovid.
evacuated going to go?
We could do things for them in their own country, help them become sufficient. Don't let corrupt agencies, basically, grift off of them like the Clinton group. Have maybe responsible foreign aid agencies and people who actually do want to help, Haitian organizations, actually do something to help improve their country. And it's, the answer isn't to just simply evacuate the country and have everybody come here. We don't have this country, we have to take care of our own people first.
Yeah,
You
so it's
know?
different than like Honduras or one of these other places. If you're looking to Haiti and say maybe you can't save them there, maybe there is too much going on that 10
I
million
think we
people
can
can't be
save them there.
sustained on
I
this
don't know who
island
said
that has constant earthquakes and hurricanes hitting it. I think like over 10 years now, like they haven't really even got the power back on. They've been in a pretty bad shape.
Because they have a lot of corruption, both internally.
Where you're
and-
saying, I was saying that even if it was perfect governance, that it could be that this island just can't
Well, then we
sustain
help
that
them
amount
come
of
up with a
people and they
regional-
have to
then-
evacuate
then, Dooovid,
millions
in
of
that
people
case-
from the island.
In
It's
that
an
case,
unnatural population. It's mostly an African population. And 10 million people on this island is quite a bit of people. So I think Haiti's
Fine.
probably case in point
if it's
of
really
a
that
natural
bad, Dooovid,
migration point where it makes sense that millions of people are going to want to leave Haiti and go to someplace better, and that place is going to is going to be here.
Dooovid, if that be the case, let's just go with that scenario. And there's a percentage of the Haitian people that really have to leave because otherwise they're going to starve to death and it's a humanitarian crisis. Then the answer is a regional answer. The Organization of American States needs to get together and have a council and figure out how to proportion populations throughout the Central, Latin, Caribbean, and American region. Probably, and I would include Canada in that. And maybe the United States would take Haitians. I think the Haitians are a great immigrant group. We should welcome them legally. I think maybe one of the reasons they're being shut down is because they tend to be Republicans. I don't know. I mean, who knows? I mean, the point is that the answer to it, assuming that did happen and that their country was no longer able to sustain a number of their population, would have to be a regional answer. That's what should have happened, for example, at the Evian conference in 1940, where you had the Western democracies get together and decide how to resettle Jews who were being expelled from Nazi Germany. And that was headed, by the way, by the United States. And the solution they came up with is that we're not going to do anything. Now, if the Canadian Prime Minister at the time, Mackenzie King, was a vicious anti-Semite, and you had other nations like that. Then you had some smaller nations like the Dominican Republic and Costa Rica that wanted to welcome Jews, and they were told no by this Evian conference. So that was an attempt at a regional solution to a real problem, and it failed because of the anti-Semitism. So I'm not in favor of that. If that was what was going on, and the Haitian people were facing annihilation, in this case, it would be from natural, disaster, not from a Holocaust, then yeah, there would have to be a regional council of American states that would come up with an equitable solution and that would distribute the problem equitably. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, if you take the general climate, as the climate problems are worse in the South, it caused people to move north. And if it's like the Etrians coming to Israel, where it's not, whatever disaster is causing there to be millions of displaced of these people, where you have, hundreds of thousands of them that try to get past the Israeli border every year, and tens of thousands of them that successfully do, in these camps that have tens of thousands of Etrians that Israel really has nothing to do with. They could try to help them get further north and put them into Europe or Turkey, or send them back to where they're likely to just keep on coming again. That I could see the U.S. border might be likely to get to that point where you're just going to have masses of hundreds of thousands of people waiting at the border, and might even come to millions. That
they wouldn't have been asking if Trump were president, because they would have known that they would have to solve their own problems in their own country.
I mean, God forbid. I mean, Israel's been shooting people at the border for a long time, and they still keep on coming. I'm saying that you could say that, like, no, we're just going to kill them when they come to the border. They'll stop coming. But you see, historically, even when you shoot them at the border, they still keep coming.
Shooting anybody at the border.
Well, they do. I was saying, I mean, I don't know what fantasy world you're living in. There's a lot of countries around the world, including Israel, that shoots people at the border if they come unannounced and illegally.
Border if Trump had been president and there was a
how
wall.
Would you have stopped them from amassing at the border without shooting them?
Because they wouldn't have come.
How would they not have come?
I'll tell you how.
The places around the world that say that you're not going to come, that's because they shoot them. And even shooting them doesn't work, God forbid.
I take a jaundiced eye to your theories about global.
How are you going to stop them from coming? What would Trump have done besides shoot them? God forbid, that would have stopped them from coming.
I'll answer that question. The answer is that they would not have come because the border would have been closed. They're coming because Biden swung open the border.
What does it mean for the border to be closed? It means we would have shot them. If they kept on coming and trying to get over, we would have shot them.
No, they would not have attempted it because, first of all, the wall.
Because what? Because we would have shot in Israel. You shoot them and they still keep on coming. What are we going to do that would have stopped them from coming when even shooting them doesn't stop them?
You would have finished the wall, is what you would have done, and you would
like in Israel, and they still keep on coming.
Well, Israel needs to build a higher wall. Then you would have finished.
Well, you need a militarized wall where you either put them into prison or shoot them.
No, you don't put them into prison.
And they still keep on coming.
No, they would not come.
Israel has like tens of thousands of Etrians in open air prisons because they just keep on coming.
They need to do a better job of monitoring their border.
There's nothing that it's for tens of years, over 10 years now. Tens of thousands of Etrians come every single year. There's nothing that Israel could do to stop them from coming.
They could build a higher wall. If they really can't maintain their border, and that's an interesting question, maybe I'll interview an Israeli on that, then they need to process them humanely. Now, you say that this is a problem of weather in these countries. Israel, the United States, the region could help Eritrea do a better job of irrigation and of doing a lot of the things that Israel does. Israel is just as hot a country as Eritrea, probably worse. There's more desert-like. Eritrea has mountains and it has some verdant areas. Israel is naturally desert-like, but they do a very good job of irrigating. They have salination stations where they're turning salt water into fresh water. They have the method of growing where you have like a little drip of water. They use every drop of water. They know how to do this. That's why they're going to Israel. That system needs to be replicated to a certain degree in Eritrea so that they can also have efficient irrigation, and they can learn how to grow enough food to sustain their population. Not, overwhelm Israel. That's not the solution, nor is it the solution here. And I'm saying this under the assumption that what you're saying with regard to global warming is true, and I don't assume it.
We saw what happened in Israel a few weeks ago when hundreds of Gazans swarmed the border, and we had, God forbid,
That's
an
political.
Israeli sniper who got killed. He was shooting a gun out of a sniper hole, and they got to the wall, and one of them, pointed a gun and shot in the head. God forbid, the Israeli, he died. But yeah, in Israel, in Gaza, we have a wall with a sniper hole, and the only way we stop the Palestinians from trying to tear down the wall is by shooting them. God forbid.
The Gazans are engaging in an attempted invasion of Israel. That's a political question.
But that's what it means to maintain a wall. Historically, you have walls, and they have to be maintained by the military. And if they try to breach the wall, God forbid, you have to kill them.
That's right. Look, if somebody breaches your wall right now and breaks into your home, you have the right to, at a last resort, stop them by shooting them.
Yeah, but that's why, like the horse, the guy in the horse.
They were not whips.
The guy in the horse in Texas in the pictures is saying, if that was another place in the country, he might be shooing the people.
You know something?
In Israel, I thought we shoot them.
Dooovid, that's a fake story. They were not whips.
Well, I'm saying even so,
pieces of leather that hang
in Israel, wouldn't we have shot those people? God forbid.
No.
If that was the case, and those people were rushing past the border, wouldn't we have shot them?
Well, first of all, Israel has a very highly humane record, not perfect, but very good, in that they would shoot somebody only as an absolute last resort if the person refused to stop and they continued to move into the country.
In the exact same case of what's happening on the southern border in Israel, we would have, God forbid, we might have just shot those people.
No, I don't think so. First of all, I want to get off the merry-go-round here and move on to another subject. I'll just reiterate that it wouldn't have happened if there had been a wall, if Donald Trump were allowed to have served a second term, and if we had had an orderly process on the border to process legitimate refugees. You wouldn't have had people swarming the border because they would have known they couldn't come in. The reason they're swarming the border now, and by the way, there's tens of thousands of more people now forming, is because on day one, the new administration opened the borders and they shut down the wall and they said, come on down. That's why they're swarming. And they're swarming because I don't blame people for wanting to come here. They can get economic opportunity. It's a better country than any country in the world. I'm not sure that they're fleeing that dire a situation. I mean, the case of the Haitians, most of them already left Haiti 10 years ago. Most of them were living in Brazil. They had already gotten asylum. But putting that aside, we ought to work regionally with other nations, and Israel should work regionally with the nations in that area to help these nations which are poor and which have, in many cases, failed states, improve their infrastructure so that they can do what it is that we're doing so that they can also be sustainable and successful nations.
You think it's possible that the current political climate, that you're just seeing the Iron Dome and saying that we're giving $1 billion as the U.S. to Israel to help secure their wall when there's, despite your own personal opinions of what's best for America, just the polling and sentiment where there's not really appetite for a wall in America, that with the co-occurrence of the Haitian migrant crisis,
there is appetite for
and the refunding of the Israeli wall, that maybe we're not going to end up giving Israel the $1 billion for the Iron Dome to fortify their wall when we don't want a wall here.
We do want a wall here, Dooovid.
Well, I'm saying you as a we, but it's
no, I say we. Biden.
And the
his
Democratic
poll numbers
America
are like 30%. No, you get radical leftists like the Squad who don't want the wall because they don't believe. They think the nation state is an old anachronism, a superstition. It's a form of prejudice, or it's a form of supremacy, and so they want to destroy borders. They want to destroy the nation state. But that's not the majority of Americans. That's not even the majority of Americans, I think, who voted for Biden, assuming that a majority did. That's another question. Let's not go there. The point is that Americans do want to have the border secured. That's what all the polls say. They're just like every sovereign nation wants its borders secured. That's why we have nations. That's what sovereignty is about. That's why we have private property. That's why, Dooovid, right now is sitting in your parking lot, your car is locked because you want to secure that property and you don't want it invaded by someone who might steal it. That is natural to the human. It's baked into who we are. That's why we set up societies, to protect our properties, to protect that which we create and that which we improve.
From just the logic, if there's no appetite for a wall in America, why are we going to give $1 billion to help Israel with their wall?
I'm going to get off this merry-go-round also. I just noted there is enormous appetite in America for the wall. The polls indicate that. Everything indicates that. And the present policy is very unpopular. I personally believe that this is why Biden was installed, because the leftists want to tear down America. They want to flood us with people that will then go on public assistance. They want critical race theory so they can divide us, and they want to inflate the economy as a way to pay for it all by simply printing more dollars.
I think we'll see in the next few weeks whether you or I are right, because if there is appetite, that Israel will be the testing ground. If there's not appetite for a wall in America,
if they don't want
there's not going to be
Israel
appetite to give Israel money for their wall.
If they don't want to give Israel
money for their wall
to finance the Iron Dome, which protects Israel from terrorists,
I mean, that's part of their wall. It's basically giving them money for their wall.
And that's not based on not wanting a wall. That's based on Jew hatred. And that's what the squad is all about, Jew hatred. They hate Jews, all of them, especially Tlaib.
Well,
anyway,
I mean, you could read it that way, but I think it's going to be more about the wall.
No, it's not about the wall. It's about Israel, because it's a Jewish state. That's what it's about.
Well, I'm saying if we don't want a wall here, why are we paying for a wall in another country?
Look, we're getting off this merry-go-round. We do want a wall here. And the Israelis, every sovereign nation wants to protect its borders. And some nations need a level of protection that is greater than others. I mean, the border between Switzerland and Germany doesn't need that much defense, but the border between Israel and Syria does. I mean, the border between the United States and its southern neighbors does as well. It's just the nature of sovereignty. That's what you do. You protect your own nation, you protect your own people, you protect your own property. That is a virtue. That is progressive in the real meaning of the word, because if you don't have it, you don't have any freedom, you don't have any future, you don't have any ability to control your own destiny. Anyway, Dooovid, what else is new?
Well, so Prime Minister Bennett is scheduled to speak at the UN Assembly on the 27th. Let me just look, that is next week, Monday. And I guess they say he's going to take a different strategy from Netanyahu, but I'm guessing that he doesn't really command much of an international presence. Most people probably don't know who he is, and probably a lot of people don't really care who he is. I mean, Netanyahu was a larger than life figure in many ways. He knew he was very internationally connected politically all over the place. So it could be that Bennett will largely fall on deaf ears.
Well, what do you think he's going to try to ask for?
Well, I mean, just reading the Israeli papers, the main thing he wants is to ensure the stopping of Iran's nuclear agreement. So, I mean, the main thing that Bennett is, just like Netanyahu in the past, the main thing he focused on in his UN speeches was Iran. That Bennett also, the main thing he's going to focus on is Iran. And I think it's probably going to fall on deaf ears. And if you think like Israel, what message does Israel really have to the world? And for the last decade, it's been warnings about Iran. And so, if you're an American Jew, that's been part of the distancing, because okay, I'm a Jew and I want to think like we have some sort of tikkun olam message to the world. But when our leaders come consistently for the last 20 years, the message has been that we got to stop Iran. And if that's accurate, whatever reason, that probably is going to be what he's going to talk about.
And I think I agree with you, Dooovid. He's not going to get anywhere, because Iran, which poses an existential threat to Israel and which is not really all that concerned with Tikkun Olam. They just got a big boost from all of the billions and billions of dollars worth of military hardware that was left at Bagram Airfield in Afghanistan, and the creation of a radical Islamic state in Afghanistan. And so, Israel is going to have a hard time trying to get anywhere there. Iran.
It's like the New York Times. I assume you saw that article about how we used robots to kill their nuclear scientist, and
I did.
I mean, God forbid if that's our main message is like these guys in Iran are really bad, and you got to team up to stop them. Otherwise, we're going to have to go at it alone and kill them.
Yeah,
and it's a really hard message to sell.
Well, I mean,
and especially for American Jews,
elections have consequences, especially questionable ones. In that the United States under Trump supported the continued boycott of Iran and an orderly withdrawal from Afghanistan, and that's been done away with on both fronts. So you have Iran now moving in a more aggressive direction. I've just read articles recently which indicate that their nuclear capability should be up within a matter of months. They do have a direct threat to Israel, both in terms of the nuclear, but also their proxy armies on the border, both in Syria and Lebanon and in Gaza. And that Israel is, I don't know, they're going to have to stand alone. I don't think they can depend on the United States. I don't think any country in the world can depend on the United States now. Look at
standing
Taiwan.
alone and killing people, and then how is Israel going to sell that to the UN? They're going to, these prime minister is going to come and be like, look, those guys are really bad. We had to kill them, and that's our message. That's our message to the world.
It's a military war, and they have targeted specific military targets, people who are building bombs so that they can kill Jews. That is a military target. That is a legitimate, righteous response to that. It's not going out and killing people. You have to put this in a context of it.
But I mean, it is killing people. I mean, I'm not saying it's random killing people, and you could say it's
would it be killing people
justified.
If they assassinated Hitler? I mean, you have to put it into context. There is a war going on. They were targeting people.
Well, it doesn't matter how badly. I mean, even if it's a legal, legitimate execution, it's still killing people.
It does, yeah, but it does.
And if that's your message,
it is my
main message to the world.
Every nation has a right to defend the lives of its citizens. In this case, Israel is defending the lives of its citizens.
It's going to be problematic, saying for Israel and for
not
American
problematic.
Jews.
Israel should be proud.
That's our main message. That's what people know us for.
So the other things they can know us for. They can also know about their startup nation and their contributions to the world and to their humaneness and to their Judaism and to all of the other positive things. But yeah, when it comes to national defense, Israel doesn't have to apologize to anybody in the world.
Well, they do, because they have to win over.
Like how?
They have to win. I mean, the international court, they're saying Benny Gantz right now is trying to be brought up. I mean, not Naftali Bennett, even just as a war
well, I don't think Israel recognizes.
And to say that Israel at this point relies on America vetoing the UN resolutions, but should America policy change in the slightest bit? Like, no, I mean, they would bring the Israeli leaders up as war criminals.
They never have changed it. They have a right to defend the lives and property of their citizens. That's a moral issue. As far as the International Criminal Court goes, they could now charge Biden with murder because of that drone strike in Afghanistan that killed 10 innocent people. They can charge
what a disaster.
Exactly. But the point is that court doesn't have any power, because they can charge anybody. You don't want to be hypocritical. I mean, there are a lot of people that could be charged with crimes by that court. I mean, that's not recognized. I don't think it's recognized by.
Yeah, but saying that most countries, not saying most, a lot of countries have civilian leaders, and saying factually, our guys in Israel are killers. They've killed people. They have known kills, as opposed to like Kamala Harris or whatever. She might have been a DA, but they're not military people. They haven't killed people. They didn't rise through the military.
You sound worse than Hamas. They're not killing people.
They're
You
military.
again,
They have
you
known
have to put
kills.
it into context. They're in a
They're
war.
military leaders
Did
that rose to
Eisenhower kill
political.
people when he landed
Yeah, he
at
was a
D-Day in
general.
Normandy?
I'm
Fine.
saying, when's the last time we had a military
Well, I mean, the
person rise to
Israelis have
power here in
generals, too.
America?
The Israelis, I think, assumedly have generals in charge of those operations.
Well, I'm saying all of the Israeli leaders right now, besides the Haredi, largely rose through the military, as opposed to in the U.S., the vast minority of anybody in our power structure
The point is
has
that
even military
as
experience. So it's
civilian
like,
leaders, they are acting in that capacity. They were
you
elected.
could call him a hero, but it's saying like our Israeli leaders have known kills. I mean, like there's court cases to
So
bring
did
against them.
Eisenhower. I mean,
Well,
look,
I mean, Eisenhower's like 60 years ago. When's the last U.S. leader that had a known kill? Anybody, anyone,
maybe
senator,
General. How about
president,
General
vice president.
Billy with the righteous drone strike?
Well, I'm talking about a senator, a president, a vice president, maybe George Bush
You don't
Sr.
think they
from the
served in the
CIA.
Army? A lot of them served in the military.
Well, I said probably George
Our own
Bush Sr.
congressman here in Massachusetts, Seth Moulton, was a Marine
I
in
said they had a known
Afghanistan.
kill. Probably,
and I
even
honor
George
his
Bush
service.
Sr. Did George Bush Sr. have known kills?
What the hell, David? What the hell are you talking about? A lot of our people in government in Congress served in the military. I just mentioned Seth Moulton is a liberal Democrat from here in Boston. He was in the Marines. He saw active duty. He probably killed people. That was what he did. That's what the military does. He kills people.
Well, maybe. I mean, saying even whether you're right, whether
Maybe.
Seth Moulton saw battle and has
He
known
did see
kills,
battle.
that's a
He's got medals to prove it.
that's a vast
John
minority.
John
That's a
Kerry
vast,
had a Purple Heart. He ran for president because he killed North Vietnamese or Viet Cong in a particular action. Let's see. I mean, what about McCain? McCain was in Vietnam. He was involved with military. What the hell are you talking about?
but
There are
these
plenty
are
of
these
American
are these are a
leaders that
long
served in
time
the
ago.
military,
Even
and I honor them for that. What do you?
I mean, was
what
John
do you
Kerry
do?
Secretary of State for Obama?
Who was no? He was the Democratic presidential nominee in 2004. He was a U.S. senator from
Well, I
Massachusetts.
mean, he lost. I'm saying, did Obama?
And he was
appoint
he
him?
was Secretary of State for Obama, actually. Yeah, he was. And now he's the czar of the
Yeah, but you could say historically that over human history, probably the vast majority of political leaders rose through the military. But in the U.S., certainly it's a minority.
That's
And
not true.
of the people that are
Doesn't
currently
matter.
in power in the U.S., it's probably less than 10%, as opposed to in Israel, it's probably like 70, 80%.
I don't understand your point. I mean, George Washington killed people. I mean, he was the head of the Continental
Yeah, but
Army.
these guys are getting canceled. It is saying that it's just you're reading the politics of Bennett coming and speaking to America. I think it's largely going to fall on deaf ears, because you say this man is a hero. This man is a hero, and your average American doesn't want to idolize military
I don't think
heroes.
anyone's saying he's a hero, but he was in the army. I mean, what is the point? I mean, of course, I think that is a major component of someone's service. Pompeo, Secretary of State, was in Iraq. He served. I don't know if he killed anybody, but he was there.
He was in. I mean, Secretary of State is somewhat a military position, but besides for Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, almost everyone in Biden's cabinet doesn't have a military background.
And that's
besides for the ones that have
probably why they're screwing up so much. Eisenhower did have military experience, which is why he stayed out of war.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that McCarthy,
John F. Kennedy had military
McCarthy
experience.
is taking that strategy of yours, and I think he has over 100 people running for Republican that have military background.
And the Democrats are doing the same thing, and why not? That's
Eric Adams as a former police officer, but even that's kind of rare. Like Eric Adams as a former police officer,
very common, and it's a good reference for either. I consider that when I vote for someone, whether they be Democrat or Republican. Someone who has some military background, who actually went out and served their country, so you can rest under the blanket of freedom. That
I'm a numbers guy, so I mean, we could argue the morals and ethics of it, but if you just talk the polling in numbers and sentiment of the American people, and I think the polling's not
I don't
on the
think
side.
that's true. I mean, it depends on whether they're Democrats or Republicans. The Democrats are putting up military people too. Look at the guy Connor Lamb. He was in the army. He served in Iraq. He won as a liberal Democrat. So no, I mean,
Trump is a businessman versus McCain as a military person, saying I'm going to go with the businessman.
I think it depends on who they are. To my way of thinking, military is a good positive aspect of someone's resume, assuming they served honorably. And I honor that. I don't think that's unpopular at all, except maybe by a bunch of leftist skunks like you might admire, like the Squad. I don't know. They probably didn't serve.
Well, no, I mean they're even to the point where that you wouldn't get any respect.
I don't need, you don't need their respect.
I grew up
There's a
listening
tiny
to Alice in
minority of
Chains, and they spit
anti-Americans.
on me in my homeland. Like, well, obviously, like you're going to come home and they're not going to treat you as a
Yeah,
hero.
that's
They're
a
going to spit on
disgrace.
you.
And
But
people who
that's been the way here in America since Vietnam. where
it
they
is
spit
not
on
the
it.
way in
They
America.
spit on you in
No, it's
my
a bunch of
homeland.
leftists who hate this country, who
That's
do
like
not
20,
hate
30% of America. I mean, the
Yeah,
sentiment has been,
that's a very small percentage, and even within that, I don't think that's high.
I mean, it rose
Yeah,
through the
yeah,
hippie
people-
era and the music of the 60s and 70s.
Tiny
that said these
percentage of
people aren't
people.
heroes.
Most of whom didn't serve, and they don't deserve to even weigh in on it because
Well, I mean, the
their
boomers, they
agenda is
rose to power,
anti-American.
these people who didn't serve and eventually filled our managerial posts
Yeah, which is
and
why
have a
we've fallen
skeptical
so
view
far.
towards our military.
And that's why we have fallen so far. They also have a skeptical view of police, which is why our cities, Black neighborhoods are being burned, Black businesses are being looted. No,
Well, I'm
I
saying
mean,
that's
I
why in
honor
Israel,
people who serve in the front line.
it's a national tragedy that the sniper on the Gaza border got killed, and in America, the guy with his his horse rein that maybe hit someone, maybe not, is they want his head.
It's manufactured by leftists, and it was actually a fake news because he wasn't hitting people with whips. It just was not true. It's a fake story. And I think that Americans generally honor the service of those who defend us so that you can rest comfortably in Detroit and not worry about being occupied by a foreign enemy.
You're saying
I
Israel,
disagree.
our national hero is a sniper who lost his life, and he was a sniper.
No,
He was
was
firing a
national
gun
hero.
out of a
Right.
hole at crowds.
He
And
was
he's
a
the national hero in
If
Israel.
he was defending Israel and he gave his life in defense of Israel from people who wanted to come in.
I mean, he was
and
a
kill
sniper.
Jews.
It's saying Israel's a
Yeah,
military state.
they were
Our national hero is a sniper who was
who was
firing.
stopping people from coming in and killing Jews. You know, if somebody was a sniper in Detroit who stopped somebody from attacking your house, you would consider them a hero as well.
No, I'm saying there's been no case in America for decades where we've you had a hero
They're
like
not under
that.
invasion like that.
And even like a police, like
We don't have people coming in to blow up American restaurants. They could kill as many Americans as possible.
even in a
That's
police
why.
state, like a case like maybe the 9/11 people who tried to attack the hijackers on the plane that went down. But like, no, I'm in America.
Yeah, they were heroic.
I can't think in the last 20 years
Because we don't
of
deal with
any
that kind of
of any
situation.
mainstream accepted military
It's
police
because,
hero.
Dooovid, we don't deal with that type of situation every day. Canada isn't trying to infiltrate in so they can blow up American pizza parlors. We're not dealing with an existential threat, a genocidal threat.
But even
That's
a
why.
cop that that shot someone in the line of duty protecting civilians.
Yeah. Now, if
it's-
they killed somebody without, for the wrong reason, then yeah, they're criminal.
I mean,
But
Trump at his speeches used to have people, who defended themselves with guns and in various things
of
speak.
course, it's the American way. You have a right to defense. It's the Second Amendment.
But I mean, it's
you
not
have
like
a right
Israel
to
saying
defend yourself.
that where 70-80% of Israelis look at this
Because
border
Israel
guard as a national hero.
because
Trump.
Israel is dealing with an emergency threat.
Maybe
It's
20%.
weird.
20%
This is
of
we're
Americans
talking about
look at those people as a hero,
something.
and
Because
there's probably a
this is
larger
America.
percentage of the people who look at them negatively than there is an
No,
element that
but
look
I
at
don't,
them as a
first of all,
hero.
it's nobody, Israel doesn't have to worry about how other people think. They're defending this.
Well, I'm talking internally. I mean, Israel,
Internally, they're
they're
dealing with a
the
threat to their
mainstream
lives.
vast majority of people in Israel look at this border
And
guard
he is a hero.
as a hero.
He stopped
In
the
America,
terrorists from
I don't
coming
think
in and
there's a
killing
single
Jews.
comparable case where even a plurality of people
Because
would look at
Americans
someone
don't have-
as a hero. That there
we
might be
don't
like
have
Trump
people
and like
coming in
20% look at him as a hero, but
because
there's
we
probably a
don't-
larger fraction
No,
of.
but this is idiotic. We don't
I'm
have
a man of
people-
numbers. I'm just saying, like
Yeah, the numbers are that we don't have people trying to cross the border for the purpose of terrorizing and killing as many Americans as possible. If we did, we would look at them as heroes, believe me. Let's move on to another subject. We've already gone over this. What else is new? What are you doing lately in terms of interviews?
No one really, because internet's gotten pretty unfriendly. So I've been teaming up with Jennifer, and she's had some debates, evolution and consciousness. So I'm largely sticking to those. It hasn't been too much debate, more theoretical. I'm doing a lot of research. I've been reading like the complete collected works of Leibniz and
Good.
a lot of interesting history. I was looking at the history of algebra and Neoplatonism, and a lot of it's related to Kabbalah. I spoke with Adam Green actually, and he's moved.
What's
He's
he
been
up to?
he's mostly more of the same, but he's moved a lot into the historical Jesus, which is an area that interests me. And the question, was there
Is
a
he
Jesus?
broadcasting?
Well, yeah, he's still regularly. He's pretty popular on alternative platforms, I guess Odyssey, Trovo. He's still speaking to people, but he's taken more kind of like biblical analysis and
Do you know him?
more.
Maybe we should get him on.
I'm not sure if
won't
what
come
he's
on
doing
with
in
me.
terms of booking, but
See if you can get him to come on with both of us.
I'll see if I speak to him again. I guess E. Michael Jones kind of more. He has some cultural commentary, but more, scholarship. So
As long as he understands that YouTube, you have to be careful on certain subjects.
well, he's already just off YouTube on alternative platforms.
Well, he could come on with me, but the point is we have to realize what the ground rules are for YouTube. There are certain subjects that are verboten, as it were.
Yeah, I've been studying. I'm not sure if there's this Israeli American Sam Arono's got a YouTube page, and I've been watching his
Who?
Sam Arono, and
Sam Arono?
just a random
Okay.
American Jew who went to Israel and has been producing Jewish history videos.
Nice.
I was looking at his Second Temple, Jewish-Roman wars, and he was mentioning something like the Quito Rebellion, and
yeah,
he's more from an archaeological, heretical Israeli school, and looking at the various pieces of historical evidence, and just interesting questions about what actually happened during the war, what were the factions, what were the sides, and then also the question of these Jewish rebellions, like the Quito rebellions in North Africa, where there's just these vastly different numbers. Your average Jew has never even heard of them. It's not even brought down in any of our literature, but Tacitus says that over 400,000 Jews were killed, and then even Tacitus says that over 400,000 non-Jews were killed by this Jewish rebellion in North Africa. And then also the Samaritan.
Taranaka. Yeah, I've heard about
the Samaritan rebellion. That I guess at some point they say 40,000 Samaritans, like in 500 AD, that there was a huge Samaritan rebellion against the Constantinian forces, and it was successful for a period of time, and then over 40,000 Samaritans were slaughtered. So just interesting looking at some of these more documented historical wars or phenomenon in Israel that really isn't even brought down in the rabbinic religious canon.
No, but it's in the historical canon, and it is interesting. It's not. Yeah,
but it's not brought down from our sources. So the sources that's likely. The Quito Rebellion. How many Jews in North Africa? And we were talking about animal sacrifices. According to most evidence, was that we brought animal sacrifices in Alexandria, Egypt, that for hundreds of years, that even though everything our religion says that it's impossible, we didn't do it. That the historical evidence seems pretty clear that for hundreds of years that the priest in Alexandria did sacrifices. Sure. And so just interesting to think about, and from a historical point of view, saying this guy's a pro Zionist Israeli, but heretical from the religious point of view. And I'm usually mentioning that the heretical Israeli scholarship that would mention that for hundreds of years that we had a competitive altar in Alexandria where people were bringing sacrifices, and then also the military aspect where in historical times there were always tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of Jewish troops, and a lot of the various battles between Rome, Persia, it was based upon Jewish leaders who were supplying needed troops to Roman or various factions, or I guess where you had various Roman powers or Greek powers vying for power against each other, that they teamed up with Jews who were able to raise armies in thousands, tens of thousands of people, and through that you were able to gain power internally. So interesting stuff that our religious texts don't even mention, but there's substantial evidence
history.
for.
Yeah, it's good political history, and Art Scroll actually has a pretty good book which mentions a lot of this. Dooovid, well, what's his name again? I'm going to look him up.
Sam Aronow, Aronow. I'm putting it here in the YouTube chat. I'll message it to you on Facebook. I mean, he just has like 60 videos that are about 10 minutes, and they're pretty well produced. He's got maps. So like, I love maps. So it's him talking, and he has like a cartoonized picture of himself, and it's mostly maps. So it's just him going over the history with the various maps in the background.
Okay, I'll check it out. All right, Dooovid. So listen, I want to thank you for joining me as always.
You want to mention, like, it's Sukkah right now.
It is.
And historically, Sukkah is the one time a year where we made a great effort to pray for the nations, the 70 nations. In legend, King Solomon, all the leaders had summer homes and met with King Solomon. And we were mentioning animal sacrifices, that Sukkah was the time of the year where we offered sacrifices on behalf of all of the nations. So we deal a lot with Jewish-Gentile relations. So historically, Sukkah is the holiday of Jewish-Gentile relations. So have a good Sukkah, and if you want to mention anything, otherwise just close it off. Sabbath and next Monday night will be the last day of Sukkah. And then Simchas Torah after, like you mentioned at the beginning, we'll complete our Book of Moses and celebrate and start the cycle again.
Exactly. Well, Baruch Hashem. All right, Dooovid, listen, thanks so much for joining.